and welcome to this episode of Trader Talk TV. I am joined today by Scott Barker from Quantcast. Welcome, Scott.
Hello, thank you very much.
And as you can tell, we're not in our usual offices and we're with this fancy interactive whiteboard, which I'm very, very excited about and a little bit scared of. But Scott, we're here to talk about embracing the probabilistic future.
We are.
A word we haven't spoken about for a while. Everyone's
Yes.
been all about deterministic for a while. It's going to be
have.
fascinating to hear more about that and look at kind of as we try and move away from third-party cookies, kind of what that looks like from a measurement perspective, from an omni-channel perspective. Before we get into the weeds of that, tell me more about your role at Quantcast.
Yeah, for sure. I'm the lead product manager for based out of our London offices. Been here for just over 2 years now. I spent a lot of my time focused on working with our agency customers, so really trying to understand what it is that our market needs from our technology and how we can best serve kind of the market with this ever-changing landscape within browsers and privacy. So yeah, I've got a long history within publishing, other advertising firms and e-commerce, really kind of bringing it all together here to drive great performance within our marketing campaigns.
Great, very exciting, and puts you in good stead for this discussion today, thankfully. So let's kick off with you delving into with me kind of what the state of measurement looks like at the moment and how we can maintain or deliver a privacy first ecosystem, given the fact that we still have cookies, they still exist. Yes, so what's that looking like?
So what we're talking about when we think about embracing the probabilistic future, it really, like all good marketing, starts with audiences. So these are the people that we're trying to identify on the open web as they browse, as we serve our marketing campaigns. And this can happen whether this is different individuals, a single individual over multiple devices. And traditionally what we've been doing is using deterministic data to understand exactly who these people are. Now, with the data we have available at Quantcast, we actually know that even today, 50% of the users browsing the open web are already invisible. And what we mean by that is there is no deterministic identifier available against this audience on the open web.
50%, that's huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And really when you think about it, like the dynamics are kind of there for us to understand. Like Safari don't support third-party cookies. We all know how prevalent Apple technology is in the market. So, this kind of behavior is expected and, really shouldn't be a shock to us. And I think today, we've largely spoke about this as a browser challenge. So if we have our users on the end, and we imagine that they are both using desktop computers, so they're both browsing the open web within a browser, Chrome, Safari, kind of, up until today, they all functioned rather similarly until this kind of change in our privacy landscape. And traditionally, we have leveraged what we call the third-party cookie. So now when this is available within two browsers, at its core, what we've leveraged this for is kind of cross-domain tracking. So we can set a third-party cookie, or anyone can set a third-party cookie via their technology at the time. So let's say here, we've delivered an impression. And over here, we have seen a conversion. Now, what we have been doing traditionally within the marketing industry is, at the time of impression, we either set or read a third-party identifier. This will be deterministic. This is a one-to-one match with this user. At the time of conversion, we then try and read the same data again. And this is how we've been attributing users to campaign performance. Now, obviously, the market is very aware that we are seeing a large reduction in the third-party identifiers. And this is where we start to talk about this 50%. So really what we've seen is an increase in technology such as a first-party cookie, location, or device data being layered in. And now this is where we see, this is kind of the data that you see available. You're seeing kind of your general analytics tools. This is the data that pretty much most technology have available to them. So we'll have first-party cookies are being used and will continue to be used in order to track events. So at Quantcast, we have a Quantcast first-party cookie. At the time of impression, we will set a value against this cookie. Same again on the conversion. However, what we've lost is that cross-domain tracking. So we don't have the same piece of data translating from one to the other. But what this does mean is we can still capture the event. So we still know our total number of impressions. We know where we've served, and we know our conversions. We've got data against those. We then have location data that we can layer in, and this is very widely available, same as device data. So already, even just thinking about the reduction in third party, we can already start to understand how we've got even more data available to us than before in order to predict, analyze, and measure user behavior on the open web. So at Quantcast, we lent into this and very quickly realized there is a whole wealth of other data that we can be using to do this and be far more effective. So we introduced what we call Quantcast measure. And what this does is it is a publisher tag that is deployed across thousands of publisher sites, and this collects a wealth of information based on audiences' behaviors as they're browsing the open web. So this will include content such as their interests, so based on kind of the content that they're reading. Contextual, so we can also understand what they're reading at the time of impression, and demographics. So Quantcast measure is exclusive and first party to us, which means we're the only people that are able to kind of access this data and activate it at any scale. And then what this means is, as you can see, we now can start to, at the time of impression, we can understand the interest, the context, and demographics based on this user. We can do this again on the other side at the time of conversion, so now we know their interest, context, demographics. We now have two very distinct audience profiles based on a lot more data than we were using before. So now, obviously, based on what we're talking about, let's remove our third-party cookies again. Let's say Chrome have decided to completely obliterate them and we no longer can support third-party cookies in any instance. So we've lost our deterministic identifier, but now this is where we can move into a probabilistic mode. And this is really because of the wealth of data that we have available. We can take all of these data signals, so understand the interests of this person, understand the devices that they've been browsing on, understand the demographic information around them, and we can do this again at the time of conversion. And then we can create a probabilistic score between these two events that says there's a 70, it scores 70 on between 0 and 100 of the likelihood that this impression led to a conversion. What this will mean is, even as third-party identifiers or deterministic identifiers as a whole reduce, our system can continue to identify users and behaviors because we're leveraging a lot more data and we actually have a much better picture of our audience. And today, this has really been the conversation that we've been talking about, which is kind of web browsers. But now, if we imagine that we have a user here on a mobile that visits a website, and then we also have a user here that has seen an impression on CTV. So something that the market and industry have been kind of having to solve for a long time is cross-device tracking. This has been a challenge to us with or without these deterministic identifiers. We know our audience are spending far more time separated between different devices. We have more channels than ever. Even at the mobile level, you have in-app audio. Like there's so much going on, and kind of they're spending their time on the open web in so many different places. So now, if we kind of run back through our data profiles for these users and the different devices, we may have a third-party cookie on the mobile device. That's great, but the likelihood is it won't be the same third-party cookie that's on your desktop, even if they are present. Again, we've got first-party cookies collecting events, we've got location information, device. Thanks to Quantcast measure, again, we have all this information around the audience interests, the context of what I'm reading, and their demographics. Now, when we get to CTV, this is a landscape that has always been different. We have never actually had web third-party cookies available for attribution here. So let's say we don't support any cookies. Obviously, there's instances in CTV where it can be executed in a browser, and these may be available. On the landscape, let's say in-app on CTV, you don't have this cookie technology available.
No, of course.
We do still have a deterministic identifier at Quantcast through kind of our first-party technology. Really, all this is doing there is to capture events so we can understand when we've served impressions. And then what this allows us to do is take our location, device, interest, contextual and demographic information, and now you can see how we have audience profiles built off the same robust data set across mixed channels. So we can take this profile, compare it to a mobile device, compare it to a CTV device, compare CTV and desktop. And what this is really doing is giving us a holistic view of exactly where and what our audiences are looking at on the open web.
So you've done a really good job of highlighting just actually how complex the measurement ecosystem is at the moment. If I'm an advertiser or an agency, how am I applying this in an omni-channel strategy?
Definitely. And I think at Quantcast, this is really what we've been trying to lean into.
Yeah.
So, we were solving a probabilistic challenge for a web browser, change in privacy, as status quo is changed by regulators, kind of browsers. But really what we realized is the power of probabilistic measurement, activation, identification, and insights. It applies to omni-channel really probably more directly than it does to the cookie challenge that we're seeing in browsers.
Of course, because cookie doesn't even exist across most of these things
And
anyway.
and they're so disparate and they're spread out. So really what we've done is, by leveraging this at the core of our technology, it means we can provide much more holistic tooling. So for instance, pre-campaign, whether you're a publisher or a marketer, if you're a publisher just using our measure, what we hope to provide you is a really deep understanding of your audience. So based on all of this wealth of data and information, we can create audience insights that allow marketers to plan against pre-campaign and really have confidence that you are going to reach the audience that you're intending to.
Yeah.
And this is by using all of these signals that we have available to us now. It also means that you can build a single audience profile based on our first-party data and kind of all the data we have available, and activate that once across all of these channels.
Right.
Really driving that unison between audiences, making sure you can kind of have a narrative across the entire journey. What we see really often as well is that there's a big correlation between kind of device and where you are in the funnel. So we may see that if you hit a really large scale on CTV, and kind of do that upper funnel brand activity, really establish who you are, and then follow up with a DR on desktop, for instance. The combination of the two is where we see great performance on conversions. And you can't understand that without some form of holistic measurement and a thread to do all this across. So then when we come to measurement, which obviously, we apply all of this technology to. So what you can imagine, we see thousands upon thousands upon thousands of conversions for a brand, kind of any brand that we're working with. We also see the data of the people that are reaching their site via site visits, all the impressions we've served against this account and for this advertiser. And what this means is we conduct this probabilistic scoring thousands and thousands of times to understand the likelihood of an impression leading to a site visit, of an impression leading to a conversion. And now I think the really, really important thing that we want to establish at Quantcast is we don't just then take kind of this score and say, hey, everybody over 65, we can have a confidence that they contributed to the conversion. So we do things a little different at Quantcast so we conduct this analysis over and over again until we have thousands of individual scores. We then aggregate those scores in order to come with our final attribution. And this really comes down to the fact that just from a mathematical standpoint, being able to predict the behavior of a single user is far outweighs and is so complex and, to be honest, inaccurate compared to a group of users. When you start to look at groups of users in the thousands, in the hundreds of thousands, predicting behavior with all of this data available to us via our modeling actually becomes really accurate, and allows us to drive amazing campaign performance.
I'm sure.
So I think something really important as well at Quantcast is, although we are seeing a reduction in third-party cookies as they kind of go away, when they are available, we will still leverage this deterministic identifier. So, and the reason we do and have this hybrid approach is, we understand that a probabilistic approach is very different to what we've been doing. At the end of the day, a deterministic approach is very, very accurate. You have a one-to-one match. So when they are available, even if we're seeing this pool of 50% without any, even as they start to reduce, if we see other technologies such as these universal IDs being introduced and they hit scale, then we will use those deterministic identifiers. And this kind of helps us in twofold. Not only do we get more accurate kind of attribution with the deterministic identifiers, but it means we continue to have a separate pool of deterministic measurement that we can then compare our probabilistic measurement to. So this is how we can continue to develop our models and ensure we're becoming more accurate because we have this robust data, deterministic pool available to us here.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned, obviously, you've got a list of identifiers here, a list of different user data points. Are there other data points that exist that can also be overlaid on top of this?
Definitely, and I think this is where we're starting to see a lot more kind of use and benefit out of brands' first-party data.
Yeah,
so for instance, if they wanted to feed, their customer listing, they can feed in their first-party data, This then gets overlaid on top of kind of all of the data, our first-party data we're seeing, things in the bid stream and kind of general available data. We can then, what this does is brings our models even further in so we can become even more accurate.
Right.
So this kind of seed data, takes, let's say if we're talking about the UK, it will take the whole UK, it will give us a lot more confidence and kind of a niche audience, and then we can start doing all of our probabilistic measurement that we've been talking about.
And so you've mentioned the Quantcast Measure solution. How does that apply across all of this?
Yeah, so Quantcast Measure for us it's our data set. It is what feeds our models, it's what feeds our analysis, it's what feeds our insights. Without Quantcast Measure and kind of the richness of the first-party data we're able to capture through it, we really don't believe we would be able to execute the campaign performance on the open web that we do. And a really good piece of evidence for this, so at Quantcast, we've actually been working on cookieless methodology for at least 7 years now. So it's been a long time we've been working with this. We've traditionally always kept our cookieless, non-deterministic models and probabilistic models very separate. Last year, we started applying probabilistic modeling to our deterministic data pools, and we actually saw an improvement in performance. And this comes down to the fact that, when we were leveraging just a third-party cookie, yes, they're deterministic, but we kind of took them at face value. Like, these can be manipulated, they can become stale, they still didn't solve our cross-channel issues. So what this meant was, we were using a pretty suboptimal data set to do optimizations on and to do targeting based on. But now, with or without a deterministic identifier, if we take into account all of the data points that we have and really start to model based on the behaviors that we're seeing, it's more predictive. And we're being able to predict user behavior more accurately. And to be honest, when you draw it out like this, I feel like it makes a lot of sense, right? Because we're now looking holistically at everything we can. So as these, if further privacy changes come and we lose certain signals, we will leverage others, maybe new ones will be introduced. And again, we just have to keep, at Quantcast, what we're trying to achieve is very much a user-first approach.
Right.
If we can understand your audience, then it's about finding them where they are, where they're spending time, and kind of, getting them with effective creatives and ad campaigns that, can really engage them. And then one thing I do need to mention is none of this would be possible if it wasn't for our proprietary AI and machine learning technology. Now, as everyone is hearing constantly at the moment, we also saw ChatGPT be introduced, and now everybody is very aware of what AI is and what it's capable of. At Quantcast, we have some proprietary artificial intelligence, machine learning, and large language models, and we built these specifically to process this vast amount of data that we've been capturing. Without this technology, we just didn't have the efficiencies or the capabilities to model and analyze this data in a way that we could, effectively leverage it for performance. Whereas now, because of this technology, we also went really deep and built kind of a data storage technology as well, all in the vein of processing the absolute, we process trillions of data signals every minute on the open web, really because of the large scale of audiences that are available there, the vast amount of content, the thousands of publishers on the open web. And at Quantcast, they're what we're trying to protect. We have a model at the moment of a free open web that is primarily funded through marketing and advertising. We really believe in allowing this array of content to be freely open to audiences online. So we really want to be able to power this ecosystem. And through technology like this, we believe we can measure on more supply than ever. That gives publishers more access to audiences, more access to insight, gives marketers access to more supply. We can really find audiences where they're spending their time. And this is all available to be leveraged on the Quantcast platform. Anyone can sign up today via quantcast.com. And really, what we're hoping to achieve here is really opening up supply. Let's leverage Safari. Let's find users where they are. If we're running omni-channel performance and we're conducting measurement, really we believe marketers need to know what the conversion rate looks like between a user that only sees a desktop impression and a user that sees a desktop and a CTV impression. So that's an insight you can get available within the platform today if you're running an omni-channel strategy. And really, to be honest, the message that we'd like to get across is we really recommend that customers start to embrace a probabilistic future. And we understand it's a kind of a scary move, right? Telling an industry you're going from deterministic, perfect identifiers to a probabilistic methodology. Yeah. It is kind of scary, but it's the situation we're in today, especially with omnichannel, and we see great performance off the back of it. Really recommend marketers, embrace this change, run some tests in this space and honestly just benefit from the performance that you can see on it.
And this makes perfect sense to me. I look at this and I think, yeah, I don't need the third-party cookie because there's all this other stuff I can use instead. But marketers have been longing for deterministic data for so long, and they've kind of got very used to it. Yeah. How do you, obviously you've given a really good impression of how you can help wean them off it, but it is a big question of the ages for the industry. How do we get the industry to realise there are perfectly accurate alternatives that can help them wean themselves off the third-party cookie?
Yeah.
It feels like a big challenge ahead of us.
Definitely. And to be honest, I think up until now, the industry, so the target inside activation, people have become more comfortable with. I think, we're talking a lot more contextual. There's some other methods like supply side curation. Like we've got some other avenues that we're tackling here. I think for me, the way that we're going to get over this hump and really be able to embrace this future all lies within the measurement. And unfortunately at the moment, because of the so many technologies and so many of us trying to solve for this problem, obviously you have varying degrees of how they approach it.
Yeah.
So, we have our probabilistic approach where we aggregate single scores. You have different approaches by Google, which means that we're still not seeing any synergy on the measurement side. So with the increase of we have Quantcast tool, we're increasingly looking how we can kind of align and engage a little bit more with, say, ad servers and their probabilistic measurement. In the analysis that we've been conducting, we see most of the time, it's around a 5% or less than discrepancy with ad servers and their cookieless measurement. Obviously, we've got analytics tools that have now introduced a lot more kind of cookieless attribution. So really, I think all of us need to get to a place where we understand the measurement that's being conducted a little bit better. It's all good I've been able to give you a demonstration of ads, but kind of, get into this real understanding of exactly how people are doing it is really difficult.
Yeah, and how it applies to me as an advertiser.
Exactly. Yeah. So then how do you then go and compare kind of the numbers Quantcast are giving you to another vendor when we don't know perfectly how we've gone from one to the other. So I think, there's work for the industry to do in us aligning on the measurement side. We need ways to, make sure brands can validate that their marketing spend has been successful. And really, I think this will also come back down on the brand side as well. We're going to need to kind of close the loop on our conversion and our purchase journey a little bit more. So as we mentioned earlier, kind of first-party data, if you're starting to capture a really robust first-party data set based on those that have converted, if we can start to match those a little further up the funnel, then great, we'll start to have a bit more accuracy there. So really, I think at Quantcast, we truly believe that this is the start, and it's a real big shift from kind of this single data attribution. Once we move into this multi-signal approach, really any data that becomes available, we're going to leverage. Yeah. So, as first-party identifiers, let's say a brand new technology gets introduced, it just allows us to keep functioning with the highest degree of accuracy that we think is possible with what's available. And
it feels obvious too. I was going to ask you about how you then kind of help apply removing the third-party cookie from an omni-channel perspective. But actually, as you mentioned earlier, because the third-party cookie doesn't exist in all those channels, if you want an omni-channel strategy, this is the way to go anyway. This is the obvious solution.
Definitely. And, as we've mentioned, third-party cookies are very browser-specific. I've very briefly touched on, we've got a mobile and a CTV here. As we've mentioned, though, you have in-app environments where, again, these deterministic IDs are, pretty unavailable. We've got audio. Again, when they're in Spotify, when you're not getting these deterministic third-party cookies. And really, all this activity, from all the analysis and the work we've been doing at Quantcast, the power of this activity is holistic. You need to understand how all of these affect an audience and what it has on your end result. Yeah. Which is why we've put so much time into kind of the insights mentioning earlier, which is our media mix insight. So what this allows you to do is, on an account level, you'll get a conversion rate for just your display online. Let's say it was 5%. You'll then get a second insight, which will be, so this is your 5% conversion rate that you just get from display. But then when we also hit them with CTV, we can see this jumps to 8%.
Right.
And really, this is then how we can start to bring in much more dynamic and strategic omni-channel campaigns, because we can start to understand that holistic journey and how we can then leverage each point in the funnel. So something we've seen a lot of success around is if we go really high reach, high scale with CTV, establish that brand with kind of all the users in a household, and then find those that we have reached via our CTV on their personal devices via our probabilistic measurement, and then get a lower funnel, a more action-driven impression in front of them whilst they're reading similar content, let's say, it really drives this increase in conversion rate.
Yeah.
And it's this is getting back to a lot of the core marketing things that we've known for ages: relevancy, recency, our frequency. Another great thing is this means we can manage frequency across channels.
Yeah, of course.
So we don't need to waste budgets spending on native or desktop impressions here that you've already established your brand on CTV. Let's get to the DR point. Let's get to lower funnel here where we know we've captured them. And you can use reports like our audience overlap, which will give you, again, similar insights based on the audience you reached here and here. And really all of this is there in the support of the rich campaigns that are being planned by marketers. Like, we want to support the execution of them. And we honestly think the way to do that on the open web via programmatic channels and leveraging, there's just so much supply out there that is brilliant. Safari, just in and of itself, it's an amazing environment to function in. Performance is great, and we truly believe this technology will help unlock that for our marketers.
Performance is great if you can see it.
Exactly.
And this is what helps you be able to see it. Yeah. I want to ask one more question. You brought up AI, machine learning earlier, and obviously it's what everyone's talking about.
Yes.
How are you applying AI and LLMs? Obviously, you talked about the fact that it ingests data and you use it to automate processes. How are you using it more generally across Quantcast to help you achieve this goal of being able to push and embrace probabilistic over and above deterministic?
Yeah, definitely. So we use it across the business, kind of in everything we do. So largely starting kind of at the top for Quantcast Measure, we ingest all of this data. At a very high level, artificial intelligence is kind of cataloging this data. The metaphor we will use is, imagine all the books in the world. Until you put them in some kind of order and library, they're actually no use to anyone.
Yeah.
So that's what AI is doing for us in this instance. We then have machine learning and AI modeling against this data. So if you were to go onto kind of Quantcast.com, you will see a version of our live topic map. So what this is doing is taking all of this data and establishing it in a 3D space and grouping content that is similar to each other. And a really good example of this is somebody reading content about Apple online. Is that the fruit? Is that the technology? The context of that word is very, very different. So we've trained our models to be able to understand exactly what that content is. This then gets applied to our audience insights. So our modeling is understanding, so if I'm selecting an audience that's been reading about Apple technology, what other content are they reading? What behaviors are they showing on the open web? So all of our insights, are powered by this kind of AI machine learning that's being done here. And then we've also got other places where we've been trying to kind of leverage it just purely for ease of use. We actually have a chatbot on the platform that we've been feeding all of our help documentation into that can now resurface kind of tips and tricks for using the platform. It's called Eddie. We really highly recommend giving it a try. For some marketers, we've been able to build integrations off the back of this information, making that transfer of audiences a lot simpler because we're seeing tools and because it underpins. It was built for marketing. This isn't a ChatGPT AI that we've trained on another data set. The inception of this AI was to drive effective marketing performance on the open web.
Brilliant. I mean, you've painted a really exciting picture here. It feels like we're getting back to the advertising of old, what we're trying to achieve, but we're going about it in a really exciting way with lots of interesting things happening. Thank you so much for running me through this. Thanks for joining me, Scott, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.